Of course, Spider-Man is no stranger to animation. Iconic series such as the memeable 1967 version and the 1994 version has captured the imaginations of... screw it, you guys saw the title, you know where this is going. Yes, I'm going to be talking about the best one. Created by Greg Weisman, who is best known for Gargoyles and Young Justice, and Victor Cook, who directed Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated and Stretch Armstrong in the Flex Fighters. I'm sure it has its fans. The Spectacular Spider-Man is a 2008 animated series that probably captured the idea of the wall crawler the best. This is actually the first series where Spidey was actually in high school and showed off the growing pains of being a teenager. Yeah, believe it or not, most of Spider-Man's history, including cartoons, movies, and comics, mostly have him as a young adult university student, with the high school element rarely being explored. It's only more of a recent thing that people associate Spider-Man in high school. So the series took elements from the comics from the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and John Romita Sr. era of the 1960s and 70s, the live-action Raimi films, the Ultimate Comics, even bits of the previous series as well. Basically cramming down what was at the time almost 50 years of Spider-Man history into one short series. Now on paper, this is a recipe for disaster, but the creative team managed to work through this. While mainstaying characters such as Aunt May, Mary Jane, Harry Osborn, J. Jonah Jameson, along with villains such as Dr. Octopus, Sandman, Venom, and the Green Goblin all make appearances, it also gave it a chance to showcase characters who didn't really get the spotlight at the time, such as Gwen Stacy, Liz Allen, and Flash Thompson. Even villains that probably not a lot of people heard of, like the Molten Man, the Enforcers, and even Colonel Jupiter. Oh my god, that's a dumbass name. My personal favorite has to be Tombstone. Usually he's portrayed as a dumb hired thug working for whoever is paying, but here he takes the Kingpin's place as the major criminal mastermind, the big man of crime. And honestly, this suits him perfectly. At first glance, the cartoony art style might be a bit off-putting to people, but eventually it grows and actually works for this series. And of course, I gotta talk about the theme song. Look, I know the 60s song is iconic and we still use it today, but screw that, we need to start using this song now because it brings a more modern sense to Web Slinger. In fact, you know what? DJ, play it right now!
Living on the edge, fighting crime, spinning webs, swinging from the highest ledge. He could leap above my head. Villains on the rise and the city's victimized. Looking up with no surprise, arriving in the speed of time. Spectacular, 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 spectacular.
Overall, The Spectacular Spider-Man is a timeless show that can be enjoyed for generations to come, as it gives a healthy balance of old and new from Spidey's history. And in my opinion, it's a definitive version of Spider-Man, animated, live action, and comics. The PlayStation Spider-Man comes at a close second. Also, did they really need to change his face in the PS5 version? Like, god damn, that just doesn't look right. But yeah, greatest Spider-Man cartoon, and after 2 seasons, it was cancelled. And it didn't help that the show ended on a cliffhanger. So I remember when this happened. I was 13 years old and I was so disappointed. So what happened? Disney. In 2009, Disney bought Marvel. Now at the time, this buyout sent shockwaves as many feared Disney would have too much control over the Marvel properties. And they were kind of right. Keep in mind, the MCU was still in its infancy. Hell, the Avengers would not come out for another 3 years. But at the end of the day, these characters were owned by the mouse. But Spidey was different. Spider-Man was owned by Sony Pictures, and I guess many of you know about this because every couple of years, we have to hear a legal battle about who owns the rights to Spider-Man. Now, while the movie rights are owned by Sony, the TV rights went back to Marvel, but because it was made by a competitor, Disney decided to cancel Spectacular Spider-Man.
That's Disney evil.
A similar fate happened to another Marvel cartoon at the time, Wolverine and the X-Men, as the X-Men were then owned by Fox before Disney absorbed them too. And even Star Wars The Clone Wars when Disney bought the Star Wars brand a couple years later, though thankfully they brought that one back. They had to replace Spectacular Spider-Man with their own cartoon, Ultimate Spider-Man. Looking back on it, Ultimate Spider-Man isn't really a bad show. In fact, I think it's pretty good on its own. But because it came after Spectacular, it's kinda seen as an inferior product. Still, Ultimate got lucky and ended on its own terms with 4 seasons and 104 episodes. The same cannot be said for successor 2017's Marvel Spider-Man, which, yeah, this series wasn't so great. And since then, there hasn't been a Spider-Man cartoon that's caught the spark that was Spectacular. And no, I'm not going to shit on Spidey and his amazing friends because that's a cartoon made for little children. What do I look like, a cartoon review from the early to mid 2010s? Still, the idea of a season 3 has captured the imaginations of many fans. Like, what would Spider-Man go through after season 2? Well, throughout the years, Greg Weisman has spread out information on what Spectacular Spider-Man's future could have been, like mentioning that he wanted to go for 5 seasons with 65 episodes. Also, throughout this video, I'm going to give some theories and speculations on what I think could have happened in future episodes, so please don't take them as facts. So, what would have happened? Well, for starters, it would have shown Peter Parker growing up. Similar to the style of the 60s comics, Peter would have grown up with his audience, with him graduating high school and attending college. There's also going to be a backstory on how he got his web shooters. Now, I believe this would have led to the introduction of organic webbing, similar to what the Raimi films did. There were also going to be episodes that showed off more sillier concepts, such as featuring the Spider-Mobile. You heard that right, there was a time period when Spider-Man drove a car because a toy company wanted him to. Because yes, this was a thing that happened. Peter and Mary Jane's relationship would have been expanded upon more, with them getting together and finally getting married at the end of the series. Flash Thompson's development from dumb jock bully to tough guy with a heart of gold still would have been fleshed out. There was even going to be an episode where he and Peter had a boxing match that was adapted from the early comics. There are actually 2 things I'm interested with Flash and Peter's relationship. 1, we will see how Flash became Peter's bully, as it's stated in the show that they used to be childhood friends. And 2, would they repair that friendship when they go to university, similar to what they did in the comics. Dr. Kirk Connors will be in Florida spending his time finding a cure for Elektra. There was also going to be a direct-to-DVD TV movie where Spidey goes to Florida for spring break and the possible return of the Lizard. The relationship between Spider-Man and Black Cat would have been ruined, as it was Cat's father who killed Uncle Ben. Peter's co-workers at the Daily Bugle would have had more stories focused on them. The Osborn family would have been expanded upon more, with Harry's mom getting more of the attention. Yes, that's right, Norman's wife and Harry's mom was actually in the series. I don't blame you for not remembering her because she's barely there. Like, she doesn't even have any lines of dialogue. She just sits there, all creepy and shit. Like she's a blink and you'll miss her kind of character. Harry's doping scandal would have put the football team under investigation, and Osborn's disappearance would have been felt. Now this begs the question, what would have happened to Gwen and her father George Stacy? Because there's really no mention of them, and if you're a comic book fan or seen the Mark Webb movies, you know that the Stacys have a bad habit of, well, dying. So it makes you wonder if Spectacular would have gone that route. The villains would also get their chance to shine as well. Silver Sable would finally go through a transition from Mafia Princess to cold-blooded mercenary. The relationship between Tombstone and Robbie Robinson would have been explored. Eddie Brock was going to come back, being stuck in a mental asylum. The symbiote would return, but cannot be bonded with Eddie, as Spidey used the gene cleanser to separate them permanently. But this could hint at the possible appearance of Carnage. Dr. Miles Warren, who took over Connor's role as chief scientist at Empire State University, would have been shown more. For those who don't know, Miles Warren in the comics is the villain known as the Jackal, who is responsible for the infamous Clone Saga. And who knows, if had Spectacular Spider-Man gone on any further, maybe they would have adapted it, maybe made it better, but who knows. Kraven the Hunter would also been expanded upon. We would see that his transformation would become more animalistic as time goes on. We would also see that he had some kind of connection with J. Jonah Jameson's son, John. We would also get more information about his lover, Calypso. Along with that, villains such as the Hobgoblin, Scorpion, and even Morbius were all going to make appearances, with the Crime Master and Mr. Negative making their first appearance in animation, and would probably try to take the title as the Big Man of Crime. And each season would have a different variation of the Sinister Six. There was a musical episode planned, there was even rumors about teaming up with different Marvel superheroes. Now, will this link to other Marvel TV shows such as Wolverine and the X-Men and Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, as they were just starting around the same time period as well? This is because fans tend to link these three series together, and it is canon that Wolverine and the X-Men and Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes do share the same universe. And again, this was possible since the TV rights did go back to Marvel, but Disney bought Marvel right when this was happening. Sadly, it seems like we won't be seeing any more of Spectacular Spider-Man ever. While Greg Weisman is honored that fans want it back, he says that due to corporate politics, it won't be a thing. And it seems like Weisman has moved on to DC's Young Justice, which was a series that also got cancelled but got brought back, which, in my honest opinion, should have stayed cancelled and Spidey should have came back. I'm sorry, Young Justice fans, but I got my issues with the series and feel like it should have ended after the first season and got worse, but I digress. At the making of this video, a new Spider-Man cartoon called Spider-Man Freshman Year has been announced, which will show Spidey's early years in the MCU. I honestly don't know what to expect from this series, and even though I'm not much of a big fan of the MCU's version of Spider-Man, I will keep an open mind. But with the news of Freshman Year, I believe that's the final nail in the coffin for a Spectacular Spider-Man. Still, despite everything that happened and what we were robbed of, Spectacular Spider-Man, in my opinion, is the best that Spidey had to offer.